And welcome back to my channel. Hey. So I know I was going to read last week, but then I don't know if you guys have ever done this where you start a project kind of late in the day and then everything just kind of snowballs and gets away from you, because that is absolutely what happened to me. I started rearranging and cleaning my bedroom. Yeah, that was. It's still technically not finished. I don't know how I do these things to myself. Anyway, and then I was going to do it last night, and I decided to lay out in the sun all day, and I always forget how tiring that makes me. How tired that makes me. So instead, I watched some movies with my cousin, and we ate some pizza and hung out, and then I went to bed. So here we are on a Monday night, going into our next chapter of. So we're reading Tamora Pierce's Circle of Magic, Triss's book, which is book 2 in the Circle of Magic series. And we are on chapter 3. If Triss had looked across the 1,000 feet of water that separated the island from the land, she would have seen 3 people on the rocky slope below Winding Circle's walls. One of them was Deja, dressed as she had been at breakfast, in her lightest brown cotton breeches and shirt, with a crimson mourning band around her left arm. With her, in the red habit of a fire dedicate, was her teacher, the smith mage, Frostpine, and his white-clad novice, Kyril. Frostpine was black like Deja, his skin a few shades darker than hers. What hair he still possessed grew in a lion's mane around his shaggy, bald crown. His beard sprouted wildly from his chin. The sleeves of his habit were rolled up and secured with ties, revealing a pair of arms that rippled with wiry muscle and big, strong hands. Kyril was half a head taller, white-skinned and blue-eyed, with long, fair hair. Big-bellied and heavy-armed, he was the kind of young man who looked as if he belonged in armor, with a 2-handed sword slung across his back. Before they had left the cottage, Deja had made sure Kyril was slathered with ointment to keep him from burning in the sun. A bottle of the stuff was in one of the baskets on the mule that the men had brought with them. "Take off your shoes and get on your hands and knees," Frostpine told her. "The more of you that's in contact with the ground, the better." She thought he was crazy, but she obeyed, placing her sandals to the side. Out here, the sun beat down like a hammer. She was already sweating enough that the drops tickled as they rolled down her cheeks and back. For a moment, she thought she saw a fishing boat at the corner of her eye off Crescent Island. When she took a quick glance, there was nothing to be seen. "Remember what we did once? Hiding lumps of different metal under cloth?" he asked. Deja nodded. "You made me guess what was under the cloths, and I knew what metals they were because of my magic." The mage's hair bounced as he nodded. "Do the same thing now. Search under you for any trace of metal. Not raw metal, but metal that's been handled and worked." Sweat dripped into the dirt from her face. "It's too hot." "Too hot!" he cried, white teeth flashing in a broad grin. "Child, we're black. Black people are made for heat, to thrive in it, just as pallid boys like Kyril are made for snow and frost." Kyril halted. He'd been walking 100 yards away, holding a long metal divining rod in front of him. "I hate snow," he retorted calmly, "and if you weren't crazy, Frostpine, you'd hate this weather as much as I do." Reaching up, he tied back his hair with the braids that hung on either side of his face. Deja covered her grin with her hand. She loved working with these two. They were as relaxed and cheerful as the men of her own family had been, joking about work as they got it done. Frostpine shook his head. "Shuri and Hakoi," he muttered, calling on the goddess and the god of fire. "Defend me from people who don't know how to have fun. Let's give it a try, Deja." With a nod, she put her hands palm down on the raw earth. For some reason, trying to smell metal helped her to find it, so she sniffed deeply. Was that a trace of? She inhaled again and yelped as the scents of copper, iron, silver, and gold flooded her nose. Eyes watering, she sneezed and kept sneezing. A hand gently pushed her aside. A handkerchief was tucked into her fingers. 3 more bursts pushed themselves out of her lungs, making her wonder if it was possible to suffocate while sneezing. The earth quivered under her, then shifted. Her throat closed with terror. Earthquake! Her sneezes halted abruptly as she thrust herself backward. The last shake had been just 10 days ago. Were they about to get another? Small dirt clods rolled down slope. Wiping her eyes, she saw Frostpine standing where she had knelt. His arms were outstretched, his hands parallel to the ground. He shook them gently, as if he sifted ore through a screen. Below him, the patch of ground shook gently in the same motion. Deja sighed with relief. It wasn't a fresh quake or a tremor, but magic, pulling something out of the ground. The dirt began to take on a strange, mesh-like pattern. Kneeling, Frostpine dug his fingers into the earth. "Will you get that corner?" he asked, pointing to the edge of the patterned dirt. "It's a wire net." Going to the spot he'd indicated, she dug her fingers down about an inch until they passed through a metal web. "Got it," she told him. "When I count to 3. 1, 2, 3. They dragged the net from the ground. A large piece 3 feet long and 4 feet wide. Deja blinked. The net was a shimmer of metals she'd smelled, twined into fine wires and knotted like cord. At half of the spots where the wire threads met, a tiny mirror was set. The whole piece fell over her fingers as if made of water. "What on earth is it for?" she demanded. Kirill walked over to them holding 3 or 4 smaller pieces of net. "I've never seen anything like this." "Has either of you ever wondered why, in the last 400 years, no pirates have ever attacked Winding Circle?" asked Frostpine. I was a traitor." Deja swallowed hard. She'd almost said, "I am a traitor," but that part of her life was over. We didn't think about how Cack could or couldn't defend themselves. Sandry would frown at her using the word cack. Like many words the traders used to describe non-traders, it was not flattering. "I lived in North Lorraine," added Kirill. "We didn't know anyone that could fight in ships." He grinned and winked at Deja. "Time was, this net covered the entire bluff from the harbor wall." Frostpine pointed right, where the protective wall stretched from the bit to the cliff, to where the Emil River empties into the sea. There's more in the earth in front of the walls, too. A mile-wide belt that wraps around all of Winding Circle. Whenever the Dedicate Council thought there might be pirates or land raiders in the area, they woke the spell net, like this. The man hummed a weird tune. Deja and Kirill gasped. The net that Deja and Frostpine held vanished. Only the open sea lay between them. Or were they high in the air, over the sea? Deja still felt metal cutting into her fingers, but made no connection between that and the distant view of... She could not be seeing Dupont Island. Nidra was 8 days from here, off the coast of Atar. Still, she ought to know it. She'd sailed from the island's harbor just 5 months ago. It wasn't just the view. She could smell land, sea, and normal ship smells like tar and wet rope. The deck rocked under her feet, and one of her cousins was scrambling up the mast, whistling. She blinked and held a metal net in her hands. Kirill rocked back dizzily. I was climbing back Blacktooth Mountain, he whispered. Deja dropped the net and wiped her eyes on her sleeve. She'd been on third ship Kasubo, whose crew was also her family. They were gone, shipwrecked and drowned in a late winter storm not long after leaving Nidra. I'm sorry, Frostbine said, putting a hand on her shoulder. I can't control what people see or feel when the spell net is woken. It's powerful, though, as you've learned. Pirates have spent days in the same place until they were too weak to avoid capture when the spell was released. And this is the first time I've been on the wrong side of the net when the spell has worked. Deja shrugged. It was just the sneezing that made my eyes water, she lied. But listen, my friends and I were up and down this bluff all the time before the quake. We never saw anything like this. You weren't supposed to, replied the mage. It works only when triggered, and it's worked so long and so well that most of the council had forgotten until I reminded them that it might have been damaged when the bluff dropped into the sea. We're to find as much of it as we can and bring it in for repairs. He sighed. If most of it is in pieces like that, he nodded to Kirill's small pile, then we'll need more help. Have there been omens of pirates? Asked Kirill, worried. Who needs omens? Asked Frostpine. We had an earthquake. Everyone's defenses are in masses. What pirate would want to lose an opportunity like this? As briskly as any housewife, Frostpine took the large pieces of net and brought the ends together, folding it up like a blanket. Deja helped, thinking over what he'd said. Once the net was folded into a neat bundle, the man looked into the empty basket on the mule. Kirill added a sack of smaller pieces and went back to combing his part of the ground. Deja went to a clear spot several yards away from where she'd discovered her first piece of the net and knelt. Something tugged at the corner of her eye. Was that a fishing boat? It had a 3-cornered sail, at least. She turned her head to look straight at it, and the sea was empty. There was no boat in sight. Sorry, just one second. Remember to stay hydrated, everyone. And yes, 0 sugar soda does count, and so does coffee. Just to be clear. Sandry was just finished with the dishes when Lark returned from the loom houses. Was Triss right? Asked the girl. Lark nodded. I just can't understand how Water Temple supervision is so lax that a novice could empty 4 storerooms, but... Oh, that's the water folk for you, all froth and bubble. They get diverted by the tiniest stone in their paths. She shook her head. Worse. Dedicate Vetiver tells me that her 2 best weavers suffered broken bones and broken looms in the quake, and the others are still turning out cloth and blankets for the countryside. She'll put 1 more weaver to bandages, but they still need us. I'll do all I can, of course, Sandry replied. But you know I can't weave. You haven't had the chance to teach me yet. That's all right, Lark told her with a sigh. What we have to do won't exactly involve weaving, and bless Milla and the Green Man both that you're so strong, as young as you are. We could never do this otherwise. Come on, leave Little Bear with Briar. She led Sandry across the spiral road between Discipline and the 2 great loom houses. Entering one through an open door, they came to a small workshop, apart from those rooms where Sandry could hear the clack of a dozen weavers at work. In this chamber, a strange assortment of things had been set up. A few rolls of bandages had been placed on 2 long tables. More rolls filled a large basket on the floor. Other baskets held giant spools of linen thread. A comfortable chair was placed beside each long table. The shutters were thrown open to catch what breeze the day might send their way. A pair of novices sat on a bench next to the door to run errands. Lark sent them to the kitchens at Winding Circle's hub for tea. Once they were gone, she took Sandry's hands in hers. "What I'm going to ask is strange, but you can handle it." She took a deep breath. "I will teach you how to weave properly when I can. What we do today is not real weaving. It may look like it, but it's a cheat. If you rely on magic without learning to do ordinary weaving properly, there will come a day when your great magics won't hold. Magic can't teach you how to weave right. The novice always has gaps. Loose threads or places that are too tightly packed in her cloth, and all those things weaken the spells you include in the work. Do you understand?" "Of course I do," replied Sandry. "I don't want to take shortcuts. I want to learn how to weave well." Lark smiled and cupped one of Sandry's cheeks with her hand. "That's why you'd be so good at weaving. You care for the work, not just the magic." She looked around. "Magic, though, is what we need today, and magic worked fast, which isn't what I want you to learn about magic either, now that I think of it." She began to open up a roll of bandage linen, pulling until the narrow cloth was stretched across a third of the length of one table. "You see those spools of linen thread? Bring some here. Put them in a row across the cloth you already have. Take the loose ends and draw them until they hang over the far end of your work surface." Sandry obeyed, watching Lark, who did the same thing at the other table. She arranged spools end to end across the narrow part of the bandage, so the thread followed the length of the cloth, went on past it, all the way to the end of the table and over. If you're trying to strengthen a wall against destruction or bring a company of people together, this is the way to do it, explained Lark, coming over to check what she had done. "We weave magic and get the stone or the hearts of people to follow it. Here, we guide the thread to continue the original pattern of the cloth, like a vine growing along a trellis. We grow new cloth from the stump of the old." She deftly put spools of thread on either side of the first bandage, then the long bare threads. "These will be your weft. They'll run through the warp threads to produce a whole cloth." Sandry frowned, turning these ideas over in her mind. "Could Briar and Rosethorn manage it? They grow plants on trellises. Flax and cotton both come from plants. I bet they could do this too if you end up needing more help." Lark started to reply and stopped, then she grinned. "If things get desperate, that's exactly what I'll do." Can't the other weavers try this?" Lark shook her head. "Not all of them are mages. Even for the ones who are, this takes a different way of thinking about magic from what they're used to. Your ideas about magic aren't set as yet. For you, it expresses itself through weaving cloth as easily as through putting a spell on a cloth once it's made. This kind of thing also takes a very strong mage." The novices returned with their tea and a tray of cakes, fruit, and cheese. Dedicate Gorse, in charge of Winding Circle's kitchens, was sure that anyone who left his domain empty-handed would starve to death in short order. Lark sipped her tea, nodded, then told the novices to sit on their bench and be quiet. Looking at what seemed like a half-ordered tangle of threads running north and east, Sandry winced. "I don't know if I can do it." "Don't worry. I'll place the magical pattern within you. Clear your mind and let the power follow the pattern steadily. Don't clutch at it, and don't let it run unchecked, or you'll have lumpy cloth. Watch the pattern as you work with it, so you can do it on your own later." Sandry looked at her teacher and friend, her blue eyes deeply troubled. "Are you sure I can do it?" Lark smiled. "It would surprise you, the things I know you can do. Now, clear your mind. Sandry took a deep breath, fixing her mind on her lungs and nothing else, holding her breath as she counted to 7. Lark put the girl's hands flat where the spooled threads overlapped already woven cloth and covered Sandry's fingers with her own. Sandry exhaled to count to 7. Lark joined her, to breathe and hold and release as she did. The sounds of beating looms and weavers' chatter faded. The scent of lint, oregano, and Ibrian broom flowers vanished. Even their awareness of the intense heat faded. Sandry dropped into that calm with pleasure, knowing that she approached the source of her magic. Lark was with her, holding what felt like a golden net. If Sandry looked at it closely, it shifted under her gaze. First, it seemed made of needles, then of cool liquid, then of simple thread. Lark pressed it into her hands and her mind, where it sank deep into the girl. Gently, Lark nudged her attention toward the materials under their hands. Unwoven threads began to wriggle and crawl like tiny snakes. The long threads that stretched over the seemingly endless wooden table vanished into already woven cloth. Peering more closely, Sandry could see new threads crawling along old ones like roses on a trellis. When they reached open, unwoven air, the other spools of thread awaited to snag them. Together, all of the threads began to dance, weaving in and out. Now, she saw where the feeling of needles and healing liquid came from. Visions of wounds, cuts, gashes, round holes rose from the pattern to fill her mind and run through her fingers. The cloth she wove must weave flesh too, closing painful openings with threads of new muscle and skin. Where something had destroyed, her bandage would build new, healthy growth. "You're all set?" Lark's voice rang in her mind. "Make sure they keep to the pattern in the bandage we started with. 100 threads to the square inch. A simple tabby weave, in and out, for just the width of the cloth and back again. It's all right if you're slow at first. Just keep control of it like you would if you were riding a frisky horse." "I will," Sandry promised. Lark drew away as Sandry continued to work. Her threads burrowed and twined together. Here, an inch from the original cloth, a double handful rushed into the same area like unruly children, working themselves into a gleeful knot. Sandry concentrated on them, nudging them apart, sending them in their proper direction, at the proper spacing for the weave. They fought at first, tightening their knot, but she refused to accept their rebellion. One at a time, she shooed them into their correct paths until they were caught up in the overall rush of the weaving. A distant part of her felt Lark start her own bandage. Later, the novices replaced near-empty spools of thread with full ones, rolled up the finished cloth. Sandry neglected even to thank them. Her attention was locked on the magic that flashed in and around her hands as the bandage grew and grew and grew. Chapter 4. Triss's luck, and she wasn't sure that she wanted to call it that, was in. For the first time in days, Rosethorn was at Discipline. Not somewhere else, when Triss brought her nestling home. She had to steel herself to enter Rosethorn's workroom. She wanted to put it off, but her charge picked that moment to renew his frantic begging for food. Little Bear, lying gloomily beside the open door, Lark and Rosethorn had put charms in their shops to keep inquisitive puppies out, raised his head and thumped his tail. The quiet conversation in the workroom came to a halt. Then Rosethorn said slowly and awfully, "I hear a baby bird." Carefully, Triss stepped around the dog and through the open door. "Nico said maybe you could help me." Briar was with his teacher. Both of them stared at her. Hey, Four Eyes, what happened on Bit? Asked the boy. Let me see, Rosethorn demanded, holding out a hand. Triss obediently passed over the nest. I am not looking after birds, the dedicate continued. Those twitter-pated fidgets at water tell me that unless I brew more decoctions and oil rubs, there will be nothing short of a disaster. Muttering, she shifted the handkerchief to look at the nestling as Briar and Triss rolled their eyes at each other. Rosethorn always talked scornfully of the Water Temple dedicates, just as Lark did at times. Weeks ago, the four had decided that water and earth and human beings simply didn't mix that well. So talk, urged Briar as Rosethorn examined the nestling. Since Nico had given no orders to keep what she had seen to herself, Triss explained about looking at the past and described what they had seen. I think maybe 5 people were killed up there, counting the smugglers and that drunk guard, she finished. You could tell where the dead had been. Rosethorn went to a section of shelves. Reaching high overhead, she got down a slender bottle. Like most things in the room, it gleamed silver white at the edges of Triss's vision, casting more light than even the remains of spells on Bit Island. Triss rubbed her eyes. It was bad enough that the South Gate and the Tower of Winding Circle's hub had nearly blinded her. She hadn't expected to see so much magic, or such powerful magic, in the simple cottage where she lived. So, Nico had you call up a vision of the past. That's a major working, Rosethorn commented, unstoppering her bottle. I need one of the thinnest hollow reeds we keep in that drawer. She pointed, and Briar obeyed the order. Nico did the spell casting, replied Triss. I just gave him the strength. He said I needn't come to Pirate's Point. We couldn't do it twice in one day. She watched intently as Rosethorn accepted a short, hollow reed from Briar. Thrusting it into the open bottle, Rosethorn covered the opening in the dry end with a fingertip. She brought it over to the nestling and let a couple of drops fall from it into the bird's mouth. The youngster closed his beak, wheezing, then sat up straighter and opened his beak again. Rosethorn gave him another 2 drops. I have to be careful with this, she told her audience, putting the reed aside. It's like drugs that give extra vigor or dull pain. He'd come to need it and not eat anything else. If you have to give nestlings food that's close to what they get from their parents, or food that are normal substitutes. Rosethorn eyed Triss, delicate brows still knit in a frown. The girl forced herself to meet that very sharp gaze without looking away. You understand you might work yourself sick and he'll still die, Rosethorn said at last. Triss nodded. Nico told me the same thing. I want to try anyway. He won't thank you either, if he lives. Starlings, that's what this is. Starlings are annoying birds. Their fledglings shriek when they're hungry. If they're old enough to walk and fly, they peck their parents until they're fed. That's gratitude for you, Briar commented with a grin. What must I do? Triss wanted to know. Tell me, and I'll do it. For now, feed him every 15 minutes until I tell you to change. Briar, you're going to go see Dedicate Gorse. He clapped his hands. Next to Lark and Rosethorn, Winding Circle's chief cook was his favorite dedicate, a reliable source of both meals and treats. Come right back, Rosethorn added sternly. Slate and chalk, please. Briar found both and gave them to her. Warm goat's milk. Goat, mind. Cow's milk is too hard for them to digest, with a dab of honey for sweetening at first. You can get those from our cold box. Rosethorn told Triss. Heat the milk in a small pan. Get it warm enough that a drop on your wrist feels warm, not hot. If it burns you, it'll burn him. Triss ran to do it. Get one of the cup-shaped baskets and clean straw, Rosethorn ordered Briar. Put them on the counter. She finished writing to Gorse as the boy found the things she needed. Giving him the slate, she said, Don't run in this heat, but don't dawdle. Briar nodded and left. Triss was quick and put goat's milk and honey on to warm on the hearth. Unlike the other 3 children, who made a big job and mess out of basic tasks, Triss had been doing household chores since she was tall enough to see over tables. Each family member with whom she had lived had made it clear that she was to earn her keep. She would never admit it, but these days, with lessons in magic and meditation to fill her time, she rather liked the quiet routine of dusting, washing, and even the mild amount of cooking done in the cottage. When the goat's milk was just warm, she carried it into Rosethorn's workshop. Put it there, she ordered. There was a woven straw pad. Rosethorn was tucking clean straw into a basket with a rounded bottle. It sat in a wooden frame that kept it from rolling on its side. I made these a few years ago, when I saw that even if I found no birds, someone else would bring orphan nestlings to me. They need support on their chests and legs. A basket with a flat bottom and straight sides is no good. Triss only stared at the woman. Since coming to discipline, she had feared Rosethorn's sharp temper and sharper tongue. Lark and Rosethorn were good friends, and Briar loved his teacher, but Triss couldn't begin to guess why. Was this the face of Rosethorn that Lark and Briar saw when no one else was looking? How do you know much about birds? She stammered. Do you have magic with them? Rosethorn eased her fingers under the nestling who shrieked at the invasion, then lowered him onto the fresh nest. Don't ever squeeze them. Their bones, even their breaks, are very soft yet. I'll remember. Not everyone who loves a thing has magic with it, you know, Rosethorn said, dipping a finger in the milk. Very good. Exactly the right heat. Get that clean reed. Do what I did with the potion. Give him just a drop or 2 at a time. Hands shaking, Triss put one end of the reed into the milk, closed the free end with a fingertip, and raised it. Taking her finger off of the opening, she watched as all of the milk poured out. Trying again, she lifted her finger quickly, then closed the opening. Again. Now she controlled how much liquid came out and could deliver it as drops instead of a flood. Filling the reed a 3rd time, she peered into the nest. The youngster was cheeping. Was he louder? She prayed to Asaya, goddess of air and birds, and let 2 drops fall into the open beak. Startled, the nestling closed its mouth and swayed. He lifted his head and cheeped for more. As Triss fed the youngster, Rosethorn said, Gardeners, farmers, learn about birds, if only so they can tell which ones eat crops and which don't. I started with nestlings when I was your age on my papa's farm. All right, that's enough. He'll sleep for a while, but you'd better get ready to heat another batch of milk. Every 15 minutes? Triss wondered how she could do anything else if she had to see to her charge. Until he's stronger. If he improves, we can go to every half hour this afternoon. If he keeps improving in a day or so, you can wait a whole hour. Triss gulped. How'll I sleep? Goose. Do sparrows and crows race everywhere at night? Chicks sleep with the sun. Come here. She went to the door that opened to the garden and beckoned to Triss. See that bird sitting on the roof of the well? Triss saw him, a handsome brown-black fellow who ruffled his chin feathers as he whistled loudly. He looked to be about the length of her hand, with yellow legs and a sharp-looking beak. When he turned, his feathers gleamed in the sun and showed a multitude of tiny specks. Starlings. They're called that because they look like a field of stars. Insect eaters. Clowns. They imitate other birds. A lot of the local ones cry like seagulls. They form the big flocks you see swirling at the day's end. I have a soft spot for starlings. The starling on the well said, "Gack," and flew away. "Come on," said Rosethorn. "We have to fix things so you can keep this youngster warm at night." When he left Etiquette Gorse's kitchen realm in the hub, Briar carried a loaded basket as well as a meat turnover to help him survive the long minutes until midday. If Rosethorn hadn't been willing to teach him the mysteries of plants, he would have been perfectly content to labor for Gorse, hot as the kitchens were in the summer, for the rest of his life. When he was thinking of other things, the Bit Island Tower, Triss's bird, he forgot that it was no longer important to hide when he had food. It had only been 2 months since he was a half-starved street boy, looking for a dark corner in which to eat his turnover safely. He found a niche in the round chamber of the center of the hub. The room was a plain, shadowy circle wrapped around a beautifully carved wooden screen that reached through the ceiling. Inside the wooden tube, a stair ran up as high as the great clock at the hub's peak and down to the secret room called Heartfire, far underground. The wooden screen also enclosed a dumbwaiter, shelves on rope cables that carried messages from the seers in the far-seeing and far-hearing rooms in the upper levels down to this floor. When he'd come through, on his way to the kitchens, 2 runners had been sitting on the floor, ready to carry any messages from the upper floors. They were gone now. Briar tucked himself inside his niche and happily bit into his snack. Something rustled in the wooden stairwell. Rats, he thought, putting a hand on a little dagger tucked inside his shirt. Back in Hajra, his old home, rats would try to take a meal if a kid didn't look like he could hang on to it. Wood clacked, gears moved, and Briar heard the rumble of the dumbwaiter. Just messages coming down, he thought, scornful of his jumpiness, as if Gorse would let rats near his kitchen. There was another sound, under the rattle. Briar knew the scuff of a bare foot on wooden floors. He drew even further into the shadows. The door in the screen opened a hair at a time. Briar caught a noseful of cinnamon scent and bit down a sneeze. Though he doubted any thief would have the sauce to operate here in Winding Circle, he knew professional thieves use cinnamon oil to baffle tracker mages. It was expensive stuff. Beneath Cinnamon's peppery tickle, he found another scent, one that was honeyed and slow. Poppy. 3 weeks ago, Rosethorn had started to teach him magical uses for oils in her workshop. "If you want to waste poppy oil, don't use it for medicine," she'd said then. "Use it for invisibility. It does more good as medicine, though." Silvery light flickered. Someone drifted out of the stairwell, closing its door without a sound. Briar squinted. The light glimmered all over a blur that passed between the stair and the outer door. It traced a man's shape. Rich man, he thought as the blur left the tower. Rich enough to afford cinnamon and poppy oils. Unless as a student, raiding his master's oil stores. 2 months wasn't long enough to erase his old ways, but it had taught him student mages were always trying something they shouldn't. Winding Circle had put more of its share of students, too, of every sort. Putting down his basket, he went to the stairwell and opened it, eyeing the steps and the dumbwaiter ropes. The cinnamon odor was stronger here. He found spots of oil in the inner doorknob and on the wheels that raised and lowered the wooden boxes for messages. Shaking his head, he closed the door and fetched the basket from the corner where he'd left it. Students playing with their magic, he decided. Who else would try invisibility in the hub in the middle of the day? And how else could he have seen the persons within the spell unless it was a student who didn't quite have it right? Back in Deadman's district, he'd never seen the Thief Lord pass invisibility among his subjects. He'd never seen the Thief Lord pass invisible among his subjects, listening to their secrets and their plots against him. The Thief Lord had always worked with the best spells money could buy. The hub clock struck the midday hour. He'd best get back home, so Triss could give her bird a little solid food. The hide-and-seek ship was making Deja crazy. There it was in the corner of her eye, whenever she looked up from her work. But if she looked straight at it, she saw only the pebbled sea, glassy and hazy with the day's heat. Ever since Triss had passed by her on her way home, the ship seemed to hang out there, teasing Deja to look quick and catch it. By the time the hub clock chimed the end of midday rest period, she felt as if she'd looked up as often as she felt through the ground for more pieces of spell net. Is something wrong? Asked Kirill. Frostpine had left them, questing for more of the net further down the cove. You twitch like sand fleas are eating you. I've got an Azagazi in the corner of my eye, she told him crossly, wiping her forehead. It's as bad as sand fleas. What did you say? I'm sorry. He couldn't help being a cack, a non-trader, ignorant by birth, though she often forgot he was because she liked him so much. Azagazi. It's a vision, a false sighting. Out at sea, they come when it's hot. White traders say they get them in snow and sand fields. You see things that aren't real. A mirage or a vision. Azagazi. He turned the word over in his mouth as if he tasted it. Could it be a mage thing? He brought the water flask to her. Deja drank gratefully. Thank you. I don't know. There's plenty of mage things I've never heard of. Where do you see it? She pointed to the open sea. I keep thinking there's a ship out there. A plain old felucca. A plain old... What? Poor Kirill was a landsman. A felucca, a small sailing ship with triangle sails. There's plenty in the harbor, the commonest ships around for fishing or courier service or small cargo loads. But whenever I look straight at this felucca, there's nothing. Are you sure you see it in the first place? He shaded his eyes, examining the water between Summersea's islands and the hills of Emel Peninsula. It's clear enough that I know what kind of ship it is, she reminded him. Oh. For a moment, Kirill gazed out at sea, thinking. Suddenly, he looked around for their teacher. Frostpine! The man waved and jogged back to them. What is it? I've been seeing an Azagazi all day, Deja explained. At least I don't think it's real. It's a plain felucca, after all. No reason for me not to see one if it really exists. They're common in these waters, but every time I look straight at the thing, it's gone. Frostpine's dark eyes flashed. Sense for it. As you sense the metal in the net, cast your magic out to see if it's a real ship. It's got metal on it. She tried. Closing her eyes, she listened and smelled. All that came to her mind was seawater. Restless, treacherous stuff ready to grab the unwary. It's just water, she told Frostpine, almost whining. She knew she sounded like a baby, but really, what did he expect? The sea was the sea, not metal. Ah, he muttered. You're being difficult. Standing behind her, he reached around and clasped her hands in his. Remember how Sandry was able to spin magic cord from your inner self? Well, throw one out to me. She tried to find the thread, but his touch was distracting her. It was easy to hand a cord to Sandry, who was giving and soft, like well-woven cloth. Frostpine, though, was metal from top to toe. His metal rang where it touched hers, or rattled. Not cord then, but wire, she thought. Taking a deep breath, reaching inside, she drew out a shimmering wire and passed it to him. Good enough, he said. She felt his power bend and spring. He towed her magic forward, intertwined with his. Now she felt metal pass under and beside her as their power flew outward. Pieces of chain, a metal-bound chest, a discarded anchor, all of it rusting on the ocean floor. They slowed. Frostpine sprang forward again. Their power swept further out. It had to be a ship. What else had sails and metal straps in quite that way? As if she saw a vessel stripped of its wood. Wincing, she realized that she saw weapons, too. A number of swords and knives that no innocent fishing boat should carry, and clusters of metal arrowheads. Exhaling the breath in his own lungs, Frostpine ran back to the shore, taking Deja gently along. When she opened her eyes, she staggered. Frostpine caught her. You two load the pieces of net you've found and bring them inside the walls, he ordered Kirill. Don't dawdle. I'm telling them to close the gates. Deja grabbed Frostpine's arm before he could go. It's just one ship. He patted her cheek gently. If his business were honest, youngster, he wouldn't be hidden, would he? There's a pirate scout vessel, or I'm a dancing girl. Help Kirill and come with him. Even if it's a scout, the main pirate fleet's nowhere near, surely. Picking up a sack of net pieces, she loaded them into one of the mule's baskets. Not yet, Kirill replied, filling the other basket. They might be waiting for dark. How long have you been sensing this Azagazi? Frostpine said. Since... I don't know, Deja said, genuinely scared. Pirate tales had given her nightmares since she was a ground-pounding baby, too little to sail on the family ships. It was at least an hour before midday. I'll wager they don't know we've spotted them. Don't look so frightened, Frostpine said with a grin. You've given us warning. That's all. And next time, pay attention to your Azagazis. Okay. Sorry if you hear me folding a piece of paper. That's what I use for a bookmark. Because I don't have a bookmark. And they charge way too much for them at literally every store ever. Anyway, that was chapter 5. So we're getting a little bit more. I love seeing Rosethorn's softness. Of course, she has softness for, children and birds. And Lark, of course, which I guess Lark is kind of a bird. Yeah. It's so funny that, we're seeing all these little details. Lark talking to Sandry about what she calls a cheat in weaving, because they're just taking the threads and they're weaving them into cloth that already exists, right? But I mean, it's a good skill to learn just in case you have to make bandages on the fly, essentially. Which is kind of what they're doing. Briar's adorable. I love that he gets so excited going to see Gorse. And of course Triss is Triss, and she, like Rosethorn, has more softness towards animals than anything. which is very sweet to see. And her little starling that she's found. Deja's funny because she's been seeing something out of the corner of her eye, and her first thought is that it's like a mirage, like something that isn't there, but she keeps seeing it. And finally, when she talks about it, Carol's like, I'm gonna mention it because it could be nothing, it could be something. And Frostpine, he's just like, ugh, my sweet summer child, you're adorable. No, that's definitely a pirate scout. So it's just nice to see like bits and pieces of what will be the overarching story a little bit later. I love how Tamara Pierce story build, like world builds, you know, for each of the books. There's bits and pieces of each person, and at the end they all come together to form one idea, and it's just cool. Anyway, that was chapter 5. I'm not doing much talking today. I'm tired. If you haven't noticed, my voice is a little bit off. My allergies have been through the roof lately. It's awful. But, you know, it is what it is. I cannot wait for fall. Like, actual fall. It's going to be so good. Anyway, so that was the end of our story today. I might, because I saw a bunch of people had done the poll after I forgot to close it, and people were still answering the poll, and they really want Dane. So I might look into doing an every other week thing where I do this book and then also another book, but I'm not sure yet. We will get there when we get there. Anyway, y'all, it's been fun. It's been cool. If you like my channel, please like, subscribe, and comment down below if you're enjoying it. Give me your thoughts. What's going on in your life? Let me know if anything's cool, like anything cool has happened, or if your town is having some sort of end of summer, you know, celebration, or, you know, whatever. Just put something in the comments. Anyway, I'll see you later. Okay, thanks. Bye.